A couple of months ago, I flew all the way from Hawaii to London to meet the man that started London Real. I joined this academy for the sole purpose of learning how to broadcast my own video podcasts. Brian Rose started London Real 4 years ago, and ever since has generated millions of views and had many interviews put under his belt. A series of synchronicities and flow enabled me to land Mr. Rose on Floreal TV. In this episode 2, I have the honor to present to you Mr. Rose, Escaping the Alcatraz Mind. Hi everybody, this is Tony Floreal and welcome to Floreal here filming in San Francisco. Before I want to introduce my guests, I want to give you a little quote from an author that wrote the book Talking Story. And in this quote basically encapsulates what this show is about in terms of talking stories. So she says, Marie Rose Phan-Le of Talking Story, in Hawaii, when an invitation is extended, the host or hostess will say, "Come over and let's talk story." Talking story is about taking the time to linger over the details of the mundane, to ponder the realms of the profound, and to surrender any structure of time or agenda. It is practicing the art of listening and of being present. So that's basically what Floreal is about. It's about meeting with people and talking stories. I am now extending the Hawaiian spirit of talking story to my guest, Mr. Brian Rose. Brian Rose is the founder and host of London Real and Silicon Real. He started these shows nearly 4 years ago with just a couple of webcams out of his flat in the Shoreditch district of London. Millions of views later, some of his guests include astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson, 6-time Mr. Olympian Dorian Yates, British MP George Galloway, Pulitzer Prize author Jared Diamond, and YouTube sensation Mimi Icon. A few months ago, Brian gave a TED Talk titled, "Why I Left Millions in Banking to Inspire Millions Online." Recently, he started London Real Academy to help others build the best you. Welcome to Floreal, Mr. Rose.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much for having me. That's an incredible introduction. I thought I was good at introductions, but that was pretty impressive. So.
Awesome. So how's it been being on vacation in the San Francisco Bay Area? You came here with your family about almost 2 weeks ago, I believe.
Yeah, I've been here I think about 10 days. I've got the family here. We had a meetup about a week ago, I think it was, for the academy. So that was incredible. I've got family in town. My sister lives here. She's got a new baby. My dad flew up. So it's been crazy. I just had so much good vibrations. I forgot who said it, but I find with vacations, it's not the where you go, but it's the who you see. And so if you ever think about a memorable vacation, it's usually because of a person or because of a personal interaction you had, not because of the postcard you bought or the museum you went to. And so like what I try to do now is on my vacations, I try to think, it's the who.
The who, yeah. So just like being in London, so far away from most of your family, because you grew up in California, San Diego, been away from the States for what, like 13, 14 years now?
Yeah, it's been like 13 years. 02, so it's coming up, so 13 years this run. So I don't get back here very much. I'm from Southern California, but I chose to come to San Francisco for a bunch of reasons. I mean, I was here 4 months ago. I really liked it. I wanted to go and take Gabby, my 11-year-old, to Yosemite because my mom took me kicking and screaming, when I was 10 years old to Yosemite, and I didn't want to go. But like being in a national park, I think it plants a seed.
Absolutely. So did you guys actually go camping?
No, we didn't camp proper.
Okay.
I don't think we were ready to make that leap. Mariana wasn't in the camping zone. So but we stayed near the national parks and then spent a lot of time like hiking and going through all the pieces. And so it was funny. I was just talking to Mariana a couple days ago, and we were like, will Gabby bring her kids when she's, 40 or 30? Yeah. So we'll see. There was some great documentaries about John Muir and the national parks that were made maybe 15 years ago, and they're amazing pieces of work. And they were talking about how these things really humble you. So seeing like a sequoia tree that's 3,000 years old, or seeing Half Dome, it's like a way of it's like a subtle way of maybe a psychedelic experience, as in like you are shown how tiny you are and how insignificant you are, and it's just a way to kind of reflect upon what your point is in life. And I went to the Grand Canyon a few years ago, and everyone's got the cliche about looking at the Grand Canyon, but I stared into it, and Mariana was with me, and I just had this like, wow.
So a sense of awe, basically.
Yeah, and I just sense of like, you're here for such a short, brief period of time next to this canyon that was carved out for like 5,000 years, and you're just this little nothing speck. And I didn't feel, it doesn't make me feel sad, it just makes me feel humbled, makes me feel like I got things I need to do, and makes me feel like, what am I going to be remembered for? So that's
how long did it take for the monkey mind to like get quiet? So you get there, and in my experience, the monkey mind's just going off. You're thinking about work back home, and then at a certain point, it's just like you're in this sweet spot of nature and awe.
Yeah, it took me some days. I mean, at least I was in San Francisco first, so I wasn't thinking about London Real 24/7. But it probably took a day, 2 days into Yosemite, and then it was just like. Plus, when you're hiking too, and you're kind of exhausted, and you're just around all this stuff, so yeah, a couple days. Yeah. But that's important.
That's cool, man. So at the San Francisco focus group, when we just first got together, and you just come back from Alcatraz that day, and we were talking about the Alcatraz of our mind, and how that was kind of like a metaphor for trying to access like our peak experiences in flow state. So, what was that like being in Alcatraz, and how did that relate to like your own mind of like entrapping yourself?
Yeah, it's a great question. And of course, only you would bring that up. When I told you about Alcatraz, you're like, yeah, man, but how many of us are living in our own prisons, in our own minds? And I was like, that's deep. Again, my mom took me to Alcatraz when I was like 10 years old. She took us on a big road trip up California. It was myself, my brother, and my sister, and just her. She was kind of like a new single parent, and she decided she was going to be like Supermom, kind of like your mom. I met your mom at the focus group, Zenny. She's amazing. But like my mom, when my parents divorced, she just had a mission. I think she was like, I'm going to try to create the greatest kids ever. And that means they're going to read, they're going to travel, they're going to try to go to the best colleges, all that stuff. And so, yeah, she just packed us up and drove. I remember driving up to San Francisco, and we went to Alcatraz probably when I was around a similar age, maybe 10 or something. And they locked us in solitary confinement in D block in the hole, and I remember them locking us in.
Pitch black.
Yeah, and back then they used to give tours. There were no audio tours back then because I'm old. That's like 30 some years ago, and I remember being like, wow. And this time you could walk in there, and I really enjoyed Alcatraz because it's almost like a museum. It's like a snapshot in time. It's almost like a Mad Men era snapshot because it's 1963 when it was closed. So all the guys had Mad Men haircuts, and the place feels architecturally kind of weird. But then you go into D block, which was 24/7 solitary confinement. I mean, one guy didn't leave there for 2 years, like these cells. And then there's the hole where you go, where there's no, no lights, no place to sleep, just just the floor and a hole. So. And it was funny on the audio tour. One of the guys said, he used to sit there in the pitch dark, and he would have these, visions in his mind and go on these trips around the world while he was in the hole. And I was just thinking about that, like, and then I came and talked to you that night, and you were like, yeah, man, but like some of these people in prison might have been more free than some of us on Earth, because we're all locked up in our own minds. I can't do this. I'm too scared to do this. What will my parents say if I do this? And it's funny is that We get so locked up into what other people think, and most people don't care. Yeah. It's funny. It's like, when people come out of the closet, people are like, oh, okay, whatever. Like, no one really cares what you do, but you think everyone cares.
And that's been your experience, like, as you've gone on and evolved with your own show, and you kind of come out of the closet with some of the things that you've done, including, like, psychedelics. And what was the reactions? Because you probably thought, like, oh my gosh, I'm probably going to get arrested for this, or all kinds of things. What were the stories running in your head?
Yeah, I was really paranoid about our ayahuasca challenge. It was one of the early things we did on the show, maybe 10 or 12 episodes in. My co-host was like challenging me to ayahuasca, which I don't think it's something to challenge someone to, but it was something that actually helped get me to actually do it. And once I was going to do it for the show, then I had to follow through. Yeah. But I was really hesitant because I figured that I could never go back to banking, like the Bank of England, all the regulatory people. If I openly talked about psychedelics, they might not ever let me back in.
So you're burning your ship right there.
I figured, but I didn't think that much about it, but I did think about it. But it's funny, you might be burning a bridge, but maybe that bridge needs to be burned, Right. It's like, so like, who am I kidding? Like, I never was going to go back anyways. Like, I couldn't go back. Yeah. So in a way, it's almost freeing to do something like that, because yeah, it's like, well, now you can't go back. So now you have to forge forward. Like the backup plan, like I think it was Eric Thomas who had the hip hop preacher. Yeah. He's amazing, by the way. And I was really fortunate to have him in the studio. And I think he said, plan B, don't have a plan B. He's like, don't have a plan B. Everyone always says to have a plan B, but when you have a plan B, you hedge your bets and you don't go all in and all that stuff. And so in a way, it was really liberating when I talked about it. And then, and again, once we start being who we really are, that's the only way you can really be. And so, first of all, we got tons of credibility for it, I think. It was totally congruent to who I was. I think if you're ever hiding something, people feel it. I mean, you've been around people and you don't know something's just not right, and they're just not maybe telling you something, maybe, something about themselves, and they haven't been open. And with ayahuasca, since it's out there, it's like, I don't even have to worry about it. Right. So like if something comes up, or if I'm invited to this or a TED Talk, it's like, it's on YouTube. It's been watched 800,000 times, my DMT show. So it's like, I can't hide it anymore. It's funny, Dan Pena, the $50 billion man, he used to be like, Brian, this isn't good. This isn't good branding for you. And then I remember at one point I said, or Dan, or is it my USP? Is it my IP that I'm the guy that was open about psychedelics? And maybe that gives me, maybe that actually helps my character or my show. And right. And Joe Rogan was one of the original guys to really be open about that stuff. Yeah, and so, but yeah, I was thinking about that, and I had to just like get out of that mindset. And it's helped me a lot. And just look at guys like James Altucher that was on my show. He talks about everything. He talks about losing $1 million a day, being drinking too much, doing drugs, screwing his life up over and over again, and people embrace him for it.
And he just looks like kind of a nerdy looking dude that amazingly done all this stuff in his life, failed a lot, and now he's where he's at just because he's been so open and people relate to that.
Yeah. Super vulnerable, and like he starts every article out with like how he screwed up, or how he didn't do this right, or how he messed this up, and people relate to that. People want something real these days. They want something genuine. Everybody screws up in their life. It's funny, we had this Dan Pena event at the Ritz in London, and you probably saw footage on the Academy of it, and it's 34 guys dressed up in suits and ties at the Ritz Hotel in London. And people say, oh yeah, those guys, they have everything together. And I'm like, I read all their bios, man. Everybody has a messed up story. Everybody screwed up their family. Everyone had problems with substances. So it's like, as soon as we all just get over that, start talking about it, then I think it'll be okay.
So how have you felt now that you have been open about many things that you've been keeping inside? How has that felt? How does that feel for you, mentally and going forth in your life? And what does that feel like to you?
Just being open about all those things. It just helps. And I mean, I think I'm learning as well. I mean, if you look at the history of London Real, I didn't talk much in the first year, and even the second year. And people were always like, what's his story? Because I wasn't like talking about myself all the time.
Okay.
So I've been slow to talk about how I feel about things and me, but it's been nothing but good for me.
Well, part of you wanted to hear like other people's stories, so you were just like a really good listener in that way, but was part of you like kind of like a little bit shy not to reveal too much or?
Yeah, definitely. I think London Real was a therapy tool for me. It really was, because like it wasn't started as a business or anything. I just started broadcasting myself out of a need, you know,
To express yourself.
maybe, or I don't know what the hell it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even it was even therapeutic for me to listen to other people's stories, to be around other people. So for me, it's constant learning experience. I'm still learning. I'm by no means a black belt at this, nor do I want to be. And I'm learning every day how to flow better, how to be more open, how to be more forgiving, be more grateful. So like I'm learning.
You met about and you got into like jiu-jitsu and being around people over the years with like doing interviews and feeling energy.
Yeah.
So what's the transfer between doing the talk show and also jiu-jitsu of sort of learning to roll and like be in flow and like feel people's energy, especially jiu-jitsu? You're really close and you're feeling nuances, and then speaking to people live.
Yeah, it's a great question. Really good. You've rolled jiu-jitsu before.
I did a few times.
Okay.
Yeah, at Eddie Bravo's place.
Oh, you did? Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, Eddie Bravo, 2-time guest on London Real. That boy's crazy, man. Eddie's great. He's got so many good stories. He's got a good podcast as well. That boy has so many stories, and they're all good. Jiu-jitsu. Yeah. He's done so much stuff, and he's really done great with his 10th planet, and he's really built it up impressively. But no, jiu-jitsu, I started training jiu-jitsu when I was like 32 years old. I had moved to London, and a buddy of mine told me to check it out. This is kind of pre-UFC. I think it was UFC 37 that was in London. 38 was Royal Albert Hall in 2002 that I went to. But it was a tiny sport, and I was rolling jiu-jitsu. And for me, who's normally a tense person and maybe a control freak, jiu-jitsu and martial arts is just exactly what I needed, because it's all about feeling the energy, relaxing when you're in a combat situation, going with the flow. In jiu-jitsu, you can't tense up. You can't try to force things. You can't try to muscle things. That's when if you're ever trying to muscle a submission in jiu-jitsu, then it's wrong. Yeah. So I trained for 8 years with one guy in London who's amazing. He was on my show, it helped me a lot with that energy. And a bunch of our initial guests were people we knew from jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
And jiu-jitsu guys are always cool, because if you're willing to train jiu-jitsu, you're willing to go in week after week and get tapped out. And a lot of guys aren't willing to be tapped out, which basically means you're saying, you won. That's what it is. You won, and you could have just killed me there, basically. And now I'm going to come back in and try again. And in the jiu-jitsu mat, there's always someone that's better than you. And so you have to come in and have an open mind. You have to be willing to learn. You have to be humble. And so we found a bunch of our early guests were jiu-jitsu guys, and they're just always cool. People think fighters are aggressive, and it's almost the opposite. The most gentlest handshakes are from fighters. They're always really humble, really calm, from what I've found. And boxers might be different, or the whole Floyd Mayweather stuff.
Right.
But like MMA guys and jiu-jitsu guys are all very humble, very cool.
So how did that like transfer over to like doing London Real and interacting with the guests?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think just martial arts just helped me just get out of my head and just get more into probably a real flow state, really just being present. When you're training and you're fighting, you have to be present. When you're in a Thai boxing or a rolling jiu-jitsu match, there's nothing else you can think of. I think that I really needed that. Yeah. So again, like I know this is Floreal, and it's all about the flow state, which it's something I talk about that much on London Real, and I'd like to talk about it more. I know Dave Asprey has talked about it a bit on his show, and so I think jiu-jitsu helped me flow. I think it helped me probably interact with people more, interact with different people, and I guess that's what a show is all about. Feeling energy. I feel people's energy like in a big way. On London Real, and like I can feel someone's energy very quickly. I notice a lot of things about people, about how they talk, how they answer questions, what they want to talk about, what they don't want to talk about. But most of the time on London Reel, what you see on camera is exactly what it's like.
Okay.
Very few times people are like really like nasty before the show. That doesn't really happen. Or people are like, where's the makeup? Usually we pre-select people that are already kind of curated to be cool, to be on my show. But yeah.
So what about just, people like coming in and then after they're done with the show? I remember you had mentioned sometimes they're not like congruent with the message that they had on the show. You had seen that a few times before.
Sometimes it's funny because these people have public profiles, and everyone does. I mean, people watching this show probably only know me from London Reel, and that's not me all the time. Like I have whatever 200 or 300 shows out there of me interviewing all these people that you just mentioned, which I forgot a lot of these interviews, like Neil deGrasse Tyson and Dorian Yates. I mean, for me, they were all just one step in a long journey that in retrospect looks like, I guess, maybe an impressive journey. But for me, it was just like they're just one conversation after the next conversation. So for me, they're the same. But I'd say most people are pretty cool. Sometimes, you'll find that you'll have them on the show and then you will just lose touch with them later. Or, for me, it's a real personal interaction for London Reel. So like I almost become like close to the person during the show. Yeah. But for some people, it's a part of a long media stop. So you have to kind of keep in mind, some people, it's us or the BBC, or next week it's this or that, but a lot of times I'll take a real personal interest in people when they come on. But over the past 4 years, I mean, most of the people, I can get on the phone to and talk to. So, it's been pretty positive.
Let's get a little more into flow stories now. So basically, like, what is the most profound flow state that you remember in your life where you just really felt superhuman?
That's a great question. And it's funny, I was driving the car here from Napa today just thinking, I'm like, oh, I guess I should know something about flow if we're on this show. I am probably the worst person when it comes to naturally flowing, but then again, you probably think that that's probably a ridiculous statement, Absolutely. Yeah, I mean,
everybody has a moment.
Everybody has the potential to flow, just why everyone is an artist and everyone is all of these things. I think the worst thing we do is self-talk, like with Gabby, like she says, I'm not good at math. Like that's you've already lost most of the battle by the self-talk. So I just did what I shouldn't do. So yes, I can flow. Like martial arts is probably the first time where I really felt like I was flowing. When you're really into a jiu-jitsu session and you're even closing your eyes and you're just doing what you should do and not overthinking it, like that's like a great way of flow. I think when I used to work in the city in finance, sometimes you're really in the flow and there's like so many things happening and you're watching the screens and people are shouting over boxes and you're watching your colleagues and you're just making these split-second decisions, buying and selling or telling someone to do this. And I remember being in that flow, and it is an amazing state to be in, hard to recreate. Yeah. I've had episodes where I'm in the flow, when my episode with Peter Sage, or a lot of times I can get in the flow.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about like being on your show, and then certain people maybe bring it out, their energy, yeah. and then after the show, you're like, whoa, that was amazing, like. Yeah. Something happened there, and it almost feels like, at least for me, that like I'm observing the whole thing while it's actually happening.
Yeah, and that's incredible. Like people forget that in a show like this or a show like mine, it's one take and there's no edits. So like it's like a play that's played once, and a lot of times people haven't met before. I mean, I met you, but I haven't met 98% of my guests before they come in. Oh, yeah. So it's a really tricky thing to get right. And a lot of times they're nervous. I got 8 cameras in the studio. I got lights. They've been thinking about it. They're like, oh, London Reel, I got this many people. Oh, it made Peter Sage super famous. It made the $50 billion man, got him back on the map, all this stuff. And they come in and they don't know me. That's hard to be in a flow state when there's a lot at stake, Yeah. I think that's probably the way not to be in flow.
But they also say that the higher the risk, the bigger the flow potential. So
there you go. See, that's why you're an expert. And that makes sense to me too, because after I shoot a big episode, then that's where all the endorphins start flowing in. Like, wow, we pulled it off. We did it. I remember after Neil deGrasse Tyson, when I walked out of that hotel in Soho with my footage, like I was flying, I got back and I was just like, oh. So yeah, the odds can really stack things up. And then sometimes I've been in the flow, and like with, for example, Peter Sage, you know, I had never met Peter. Peter had never met me. We didn't know what we were going to talk about, and we just started flowing. And that episode has been so well received because I think they felt the flow of me and him. It wasn't necessarily me, and it wasn't necessarily Peter. It was like they felt our flow because Peter had said those ideas before, and I had interviewed other people before, but there was something about people feeling the flow. And that's why I always try to remind guests when they come on is that if I'm interested in the guest and we have this awesome conversation, then it's a great show. If you just regurgitate or I just regurgitate ideas that are great, you know, it could be okay, but it's not going to be like that powerful piece.
Yeah, I remember Dorian Yates had mentioned that at the last show, like, all right, Brian, let's just forget all this other stuff. Let's just talk from the heart.
Yeah, because our first show with Dorian was, again, just flow. I mean, he didn't know who we were. We didn't know who he was, and we just we flowed. And I listened to that back, and it was almost like you couldn't have scripted that thing any better as far as the beats that it kept hitting. And you know, it's our most watched episode, like 2 million plus views. Go figure. And it was still the old 3-camera setup, you know, like webcams. So again, it wasn't the production value. It was,
and you had mentioned that in a pre-roll earlier. You know, it's not about like your basically like your all your equipment and your setup. Is basically the story that really captures the audience.
Yeah, I mean, once you have basic audio and some decent video, then it can just then it's all about the content and then the interaction. So, but you know, I don't know how I get into the flow state. I can do all these things to set myself up to be there. And I don't know, you probably know more about this than me, but I'm guessing, you know, if you have certain things happening, like say you have like a siren going off or someone coming around and beating you up every 10 minutes, it's probably hard to get into a flow state. But like in my set, I used to kick everybody out of the studio. That means girlfriends, that means agents, that means everyone. I used to set the cameras up myself, which makes my operation look smaller, but like it also makes it more intimate. So I try to set it up to be the greatest possibility of a flow state. But honestly, Tony, I'm still learning. You know, I need to take my notes and throw them away. You know, Neil Strauss, who wrote the book The Game, he's a famous writer, and he's interviewed so many people for Rolling Stone magazine. I mean, it's like huge names. And he always says that he writes down all of his questions on a piece of paper, and then right before the interview, he takes up and folds it up and puts it in his pocket. As in, so he wants to be prepared, but doesn't want to be focusing on his notes. So like, I try to do that. I keep them with me on my tablet these days, just in case, because like in a 2-hour or 3-hour interview, sometimes you need to be make sure you don't miss something. I still regret that I didn't ask George Galloway about Fidel Castro. And like, but you know, that's me. I kicking myself after like a great interview. I was like, I didn't ask him about Castro. I mean, how many guys?
But aren't you gonna have him on the show?
Yeah, he's coming back. So I'll ask him again. Yeah, no, you're right. Well said.
Yeah, that's like flow. In a nutshell, or like in hindsight, where you know you may have missed something, but just like how we even met, I consider that like a flow moment too, or a flowment. And you know, when you kick yourself, it's almost like you'll get that other opportunity if you just let go.
Right. Yeah, you're totally right. I mean, that is a great way of flowing. Like an old jiu-jitsu black belt of mine said, submissions are like buses. You know, if you miss one, just wait for the next one. So like, that's a total flow state to be in. So you're right. Why am I kicking myself about asking Galloway a question that I can ask him again? So yeah, I mean, the perfectionism can kill maybe a flow state.
Absolutely.
You know, in that way. Can you briefly talk about the story of how you met me and how you were in flow? Because you could have almost met me. You could have forced a meeting with me, and yet you didn't feel right. But I feel like you should tell people that.
Yeah, absolutely. Story. I mean, so obviously I've been following you for, I think it's close to 2 years now, and had heard about you on Joe Rogan and was intrigued by the name London Real, because in my whole life, as my mom always taught me, just be yourself, just be real. And so I watched that episode and I really liked what you guys were saying, and I just kind of kept up with it. And then long story short, you were coming to California to be at the Tai Lopez event, and I really wanted to meet you. I've actually like emailed you a couple of times telling you about starting Floreal, and I remember watching some of your videos. You're like, just start it. Like, don't ask me about like what equipment to get or what editing software. It's basically, you need to figure it out yourself, because that's how I did it, and it's basically like a way to eliminate the chumps from the real deal, right?
Yeah.
So
I think I wrote that on the site.
yeah, you wrote that on the website. So I went there, I saw you. You know, obviously, like everybody was crowding around you, they wanted to meet you. I just kind of like kept my distance, and knowing Flo, I just waited for like the opening. And too many people around you, I knew you were jet lagged.
I wasn't, yeah, and I wasn't expecting that many people to want to talk to me, so that was strange for me.
It was pretty cool to see, and then basically I just let go, and then that first night I was leaving the seminar, and I just happened to like look up as I was crossing the street, and Hollywood Boulevard, and there
like
you
midnight,
were,
right?
Yeah, midnight. You were taking photos, probably like a little like selfie video.
Yeah.
You know, just kind of for London Real, and I knew you were tired, and I just felt like I was gonna meet you. There's gonna be another opportunity, and I just yelled out Brian Rose as you crossed the street, and we like high-fived, and I just like hopped on the subway and went home, and the next day was the event again, and you know, again, like people are just swarming you, and
Right.
and I just had the opportunity the final night as the seminar ended. You walked by as I was talking to a couple gentlemen, and then as I was finishing the conversation, I saw you walking by, and a girl came up to me at that moment and was like, "What is this seminar about? This is intriguing. Can you tell me?" And you're there in the corner, and I was like trying to tell her as fast as I could. And then like the moment I finished, I turned and like you disappeared, and I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna run over to where you were." So I went over the corner, and then there was two elevators, and I was like, and you had vanished. So I was like, "Oh man, I missed my opportunity," right? But in my mind, I just knew that somewhere, sometime, it was gonna happen, and then of course you started the London Real Academy. And I figured this would be the place where I would learn how to do like camera setups and in a few days from now. And that was pretty much like one of the biggest things I wanted to get out of the academy, and maybe even interact with you. And then there was the opportunity to do a focus group in London. And at that time I decided, during that time I moved to Hawaii, and just realized like this was home, and had a lot of resistance about going to this focus group that was coming up. I had reserved it 2 months in advance, and you know, the time came, and it was like I was on the hot seat, and I was like, you know what, man, this is the time. I feel it, and I knew that despite the resistance, if I just pushed through, everything would work out. And you already know, like, we already told this story, but I ran into like every kind of resistance on the way, and
Right, trying to get to London.
trying to get to London, and finally met you, and you were like, kind of like, whoa, wait a minute, you came all the way here just for me? And I'm like, yeah, pretty much that's what I did.
Yeah,
So.
and it was a big move, and so like we started hearing through Nura and a community manager that you were coming, and then when you got there, you stood up at the focus group and you told your story, and then it was like, wait a second, who is this guy? We started to feel your vibe. Everyone right away was like, we like Tony, we like, your great vibration, great story, and so, but like I didn't realize there had been that crazy history. And and I'm so glad it happened the way it did, because like at Ty's thing, like I was like, I barely wake. I remember high-fiving you, but like I was like barely pushing through, and the only reason I was even at dinner is because like I was like, I'm here at Ty's conference, and he's like, can you please come to dinner? And I was like, okay, but like I was on fumes, because it's like 8 in the morning London time, or 9 in the morning, and like I'd been up all night, and so like I barely remember it, and so I'm glad we didn't meet then. Because like I was just this exhausted energy, and like everyone was like talking to me. I wasn't even expecting that many people to talk to me, and after a while, it's just too much sometimes. Yeah. So.
And the same thing in hindsight too. I wasn't in the right place or frame of mind at that time to meet you. So if I had forced it, like the situation could have just totally changed, and we'd never have met, or something could have happened that just didn't flow. And that's what I feel in life. Is like, sometimes things happen when it's ripe. the apple falls off the tree when it's ripe. So some people sometimes are trying to force things in life, and it's maybe just not the time at that moment to do what they want to do.
Right.
And then there's this ripening process where all of a sudden the apple falls off the tree and it just feels effortless. And right now, like, as much as I'm still putting effort, it doesn't feel like a struggle, because it's just the perfect time,
Yeah, I'm always curious about like when do you push and when do you not? Because like you're right. I mean, when it's ripe, it falls and it flows easily, but sometimes you have to push hard and push yourself. It's a fine line, and learning that is hard. When you're younger, you always want to force it. And my whole life, I was putting, the square peg through the round hole, and sometimes it fits. Most of the times it doesn't, and Dorian Yates said the same thing, if you try to push against the tide or the current, he's like, you're really going to lose at the end of the day.
And you'll die.
Yeah, and I mean, I love conviction and I love, fortitude, and, I still train martial arts, and it's like, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, but you do need to listen to the flow and, listen to that yin and yang. I go back and forth with that, to be honest. I go back and forth between hard work and getting things done no matter what, and then letting things happen in the right time.
Yeah, well, you want to do both. That's been my experience. It's not just like, oh, I'm just going to sit back and meditate on something and it's just going to show up, which has happened to me in my life, But I can't, I'm not that consistent, where it's happening like 90+%, So most of the time it's like preparing. So kind of like this interview, I actually like looked up your bio. I have watched all your videos, so I kind of knew where the evolution was in becoming London Real. And then I just and almost in preparation, I could see a certain, if you're really like clear, you can see like certain like information that starts like flowing in. And you're like, that felt pretty effortless. Like I need to use that and bring that up. Right. So it's just like the art. I remember Dorian Yates was talking about the same thing. It's like you are putting forth effort, but you need to be like paying attention in the moment to know like when to push or when to like back off, and that's the beauty of it, because it is a mystery. And we need to find it out ourselves, because I could like tell people about like the different flow triggers and like what the best environment to be in for flow. But really, as we like are in our journey, we start to discover like what really works for us, right? Because it's not like a like cookie cutter approach. Like everybody's different, but there is something about like putting effort and then knowing when to like back off. It's just like turning the dial, Yeah.
Yeah, no, and then that's like, in a conversation, which is kind of what I do for a living, I guess. Yeah, you really need to be really highly in touch with what the flow is, what the person's feeling. I mean, sometimes I'll have a load of questions, but sometimes the interview will be over. Like sometimes you feel like, for me, an interview peaks at a certain point, and at the end you're just asking questions that are now no longer relevant, because like conversation has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and so like. You need to be aware of the flow of that conversation. It can't be like, I need to tick off A, B, C, D, E, and F to get this done. So.
Yeah. And usually people find out that they were in flow until like after the fact. And so if you look in hindsight, start connecting the dots, right? And then like I was gonna ask you, like there are certain distinctions that happen when you're like interviewing people or even just having a conversation. If you're really present, like you can see like eye tracking, you can see like facial physiology change, like breathing, and your field like expands. So you start to see like not only just the body, but like all around. And I don't want to get like too like into the woo and stuff, but you start to see things that are almost kind of matrix-like, with codes and stuff, like you're like getting like more information and data when you're in these like heightened states where you're releasing all these amazing neurochemicals and you're just like so like present and so like connected with the individual. It's like a feedback loop. You being an engineer, there's like this feedback loop where like I kind of call it like a toroidal energy, where you're just moving through different spaces until there's no more resistance between you and the individual, and it almost feels like you have become one.
Right, and that's a flow state like with a person. I guess if you're having a flow state on your own, like doing something or doing an art, then it's different.
Well, similar. It's just you and the object, right? So whether if you're like on the game, the court, or like out surfing or with nature, you feel this connection with whatever canvas you're interacting with. So sometimes the canvas is the person, sometimes it's the person with the environment.
Right.
Like when you guys went to, the redwoods, Yosemite, where there's like a group flow state, so you're with like multiple people and you're in big nature. Like it's pretty profound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's true. I'm just thinking about it now in all these different ways. And, in some of those focus groups, they feel like they're flowing, like the one you were at. Honestly, almost every one we've had so far, including the one in San Francisco. Like for me, it feels like, wow. Like, I don't know, for me, it just feels like all these new people are sharing this information. And like we had ours on a Thursday night. Thursday night.
Yeah.
And I just was thinking, like, there's no music, there's no booze, there's none of this, but like this has got to be one of the best nights most people are having like the whole year. Now maybe I'm being crazy, but like I was like, wow, everyone's like opening up, they're learning about themselves, they're forcing themselves to get up and talk about themselves. I don't know, I just feel like there's a lot of flow.
I think that when there is vulnerability and people are sharing their stories, so like that night when I was in London, I like shared this like crazy story that like everybody was kind of like forced to step up their game, as you would say, and
Yeah, you really made everyone step up their game.
yeah.
Yeah, and some people, it's like I feel like for our focus groups, like it's okay if some people are a little uncomfortable. I feel like it's okay if somebody's maybe in a bad state when they're talking about something hard, because I feel like it forces us all to kind of go somewhere a little hard, somewhere a little fun, somewhere a little scary, something with a resolution, and I don't know. It feels like kind of like a little mini journey.
Yeah, it's like a microcosm of life,
Yeah.
because like anytime I hear somebody talk about being like positive all the time, or they never like talk about like feeling guilt or shame, or like any time that they were defeated in life, like to me you're not really being human, you're not really sharing like the full spectrum of the human experience.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't feel real to me when somebody's always like on Facebook talking about all the great things in their life and not really sharing like what is to be like truly human, which is to experience like every emotion, including sadness. It's not realistic to be like in a flow state, blissed out like all the time. Like they call that like schizophrenia.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, every single guest I've had, I remember it was Ice-T that said it's not about the come up, it's about the come back. So like every single person I've had on the show has had their downside, and that's what builds character, and that's what shows what you're made of, including myself. And so like you can't believe anyone that is positive all the time. Look, I love being positive. I love the expression, what's good, when you're going to say something to someone. I love someone that's always thinking that way, but it's not realistic that we're like that all the time, and you need to talk about it. And so like all my guests have something that went bad, and so I always want to ask them, because you learn a lot about someone. It's hard to come back from that. It's easy to have hits after hits after hits, but it's like we all come to a point in our life where something doesn't work. And if it doesn't, then you're not reaching big enough, and then there's something wrong with you. Like you said, it's a schizophrenia or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Something like
some sort of like mania.
Yeah, or you're not reaching hard enough, and you should set bigger goals. Or even Ido Portal, who's coming back soon, he was just like, Brian, when your dogma, you catch up with your dogma, and it's not what you thought it was. You're like, oh, when I'm this, I will be happy. When I master the one arm handstand, then I will be this. So Ido works on that for 2 years. By the time he gets it, he hates it. He's bored with it, doesn't want to do it anymore, doesn't even know why that was a goal. So like we're constantly going through these iterations. For me, what was it, 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. When we got it, we didn't even celebrate that day. Like we didn't even say good job to everybody, because we were already like focused on the next goal. We already wanted something else. Now we wanted an academy. Now the academy is much more important than how many views we have. That doesn't even matter anymore. So it's like, yeah, you got to constantly reevaluate yourself, expect to be disappointed with yourself, expect to have some hard times, expect to have those, what is it, a midlife crisis? That's when your dogma isn't what you thought it was, and you're going to have this seismic shift. Sometimes that happens.
One of the biggest things I ever heard was like the breakdown always leads to the breakthrough. So anytime you like run across like a problem, a lot of people quit, but like, you know, it actually is like the time that you should get really excited because you're like that close. You're like, what, 3 feet from gold, from like coming across that aha epiphany solution moment, which is like another flow state, you know? And so many people like quit too soon.
It's so hard because like the time when you're frustrated is, you're right, it's the moments of gold, because like that's when great products are created. Like we're in the technology center of the world here in San Francisco, or I am in London, and it's like when people find frustrations, they call it pain points, and when you find a solution, then you have a business, for example. And so like our most frustrating moments for me were our great breakthroughs later. And so, and that's, but it's so hard to realize that when you're in the middle of it, you know?
You're so deep in shit, you can't like see the light, you know?
But that's when the learning curve is the strongest, you know, whether it's in martial arts where I couldn't figure out how to, you know, hit the armbar from mounts, and then finally I got it. Or we continue to have these things every day, you know, whether it's this or that, or the show, or the academy, or getting the right people. And you have to remember, these are the valuable moments. You're right.
Absolutely. And you brought up the academy, right? So one of the greatest things that I've noticed about that I've never seen in any other like kind of school or academy or seminar or whatnot, but the actual like community and the love behind it, and the fact that like people are like being vulnerable, and there's other people that are actually like sort of like uplifting those individuals, like number one, by like leading by example. You know, not just like, oh yeah, woo woo, let's like, you know, let's be positive and like, you know, encourage you, but people are actually like getting shit done, you know, and there's that space of allowing people to be who they are, where now you don't have to worry about like not being you, that you could just express yourself. You almost feel free, and at least for me, I just find myself getting shit done without anybody really nagging at me.
Nice. Okay, good. This is all feedback for me. So the academy's been open for just over 4 months, you know, which is hard for me to believe, because I was in San Francisco for a conference 4 months ago when we had like 10 members of the academy. And like, I remember someone said, why don't we have a meetup of London Realers? And I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. Now, 4 months fast forward, we've got 20 people in a room that came together to be extremely vulnerable that night and talk about themselves. So like, I don't know, I'm just like super humbled by the academy. I'm super excited. Again, it's like the only metric that matters now, because like all these people coming together, and you know, we've got over 600 members now. And like you said, they're all being vulnerable. And look, we had this vision of what the academy was going to be, and we wanted to get it up and running. And we knew the social factor was going to be important, but we didn't know how we could build it. And we knew it wanted to have a lot of the ideas that London Real has that we never maybe stated. And we knew that action was important, but like nobody wants, like you said, like this woo positive fest where people just post like, you know, positive Instagram photos, and you know, people don't respond to that. And so like you need to be vulnerable, but then you need to be action oriented about it and be accountable. And so like if you're feeling that, that makes me like so happy, because we're trying to foster that in the academy. But honestly, Tony, I can't control that. There's 630 souls in there. So I can say, guys, I really like the academy to be this, but it's only going to be what everyone makes it. So hopefully we foster this environment where people can be vulnerable but not get depressed. But you can have a bad day, but then hopefully we take some action. And then someone says, oh, here's my story, and this is what I learned. Or I just noticed that I've been slacking in this, and I better do this. So like if I just want to keep this spirit going, because it feels like we have something so important.
Yeah, you kind of primed it with your show about being real in the first place. So you always talk about like, you know, being real is already setting up a filter for, you know, eliminating the chumps from the real deals, right? So all these people from the academy obviously like gravitated to like how you are and been following over the years, including me. And that was one of the reasons why I actually had to like go to London. It was worth the trip to see you in person, because I did get a glimpse of you at the Lopez seminar, but you know, I really wanted to like have a conversation with you. And one of the things that you have is these like cocktail hours after the focus group, where you know, everybody can just like let their hair down, have a couple of like drinks, and then you can really see the true colors, you know.
Right. True. No, it's true. It's true. You're right about the academy. I mean, I guess like the people that are in the academy, first of all, they're the hardcore London reelers, which means you probably watched 20 episodes or 30 or 40 or 100, I don't know. And so that means you sat and listened to all these different points of view, and you've listened into unedited, uncut things. So that means, you've sat through the slow moments or the hard moments. And so you've just, I just find that it breeds a certain type of person that's has a lot of empathy, but is curious and that is introspective about themselves, that wants to be better, but doesn't want to just be entertained. So like right away, you're already talking about super cool people. I'm telling you, I used to meet these people on the streets or even at Ty's conference, like all these people were cool. I'm like, wow, they're like, yeah, I watched this. And we all of a sudden start talking about Dorian or talk about this or talk about Dan Pena and, is he pushing you? Are you getting stuff done? And like all this stuff. Then you take the academy where people are now investing in themselves and investing in the academy, and then they buy in like on another level. And then it's been incredible. Like, the focus group you came to, we had booked that like on a whim when we started the academy. I didn't even know what they were going to be. And yet you showed up for that along with, 15 other people that night. And we've just gone so deep. So like, I don't know where this is going. It's hard for me to believe this has been 4 months. I mean, it feels like a year or something. And I'm changing because like I do these focus groups now. I never did anything like that before. Yeah. So now like I'm present. I'm doing these talks. I'm doing these tribe talks. I'm talking to the people. We're trying to listen to what everyone says and get people to meet up. I know you met Matthew at the last group, and like you guys might now form a relationship on your own. Absolutely. So like that makes me super happy that like all these London Reelers are connecting, and you don't need me to be there. You don't need to be there talking about me. You guys just need to be figuring out the people you want to meet in your life, and who you guys want to be a part of.
Maybe. Kind of funny that your academy is turning into a matchmaking site.
Right? I know.
You're gonna hear two people are gonna get married.
I know. I already thought about that the other day. I was like, yeah, it's gonna happen. I'm like, and it will happen because like there's some deep stuff going on. Like even in that meeting on Thursday, it was like, man, everyone's getting real there. And so you could see people thinking like, I want to know more about that person. I want to know about that person, and they'll contact them. And so if we can facilitate that, and then people like stepping their lives up and their businesses up, I'm telling you, Tony, like in 6 months' time, we're going to look at this academy and we're going to be like, oh my gosh, now, when you travel around the world, you'll have academy members that you can lock into, and they're going to be cool. They're going to have time for you. I don't know. I just think it's going to be so much bigger than I ever thought. We used to have metrics on the show, and Julian knows this, and Dre, who you met, who are the core of our team, and Luisa, who does all our video, and so many others now. But we used to have metrics, I mean, my metric at the beginning of the year, I'll tell you, it was like 1 million YouTube subs. It was like 10 times what we had. And I used to be so focused on these like views and subs. And, now I'm really focused on like the academy. Like, what can we make it do? And like, where are we going to take the show? And how can we step it up like everywhere? So,
so I want to like emphasize what you're saying here. So basically, like, you're humble enough to listen to the feedback of the people that are supporting the lifeblood of like London Real and London Real Academy. And so you're getting like in flow stage, you start getting like all this extra feedback that you've never seen before. And then if you pay attention to this and you're like totally present, you start to see that these things start to take on a life of its own. So you're saying like, I don't know where this is going, but it's kind of fun. I mean, it is fun, and you're just like blown away like what's happening in the last like 4 months, which is like another thing I want to emphasize, is that it feels like you're living, at least for me, is you're living like multiple lifetimes compressed in like a shorter time frame. So like you go to bed and like, I remember Philip McKernan was talking about with this like little stinky grin on your face that like, holy crap, man, like I really lived that day. I really lived today, and you really lived like the last 4 months since you started the academy.
It's funny, so that was the Philip McKernan episode, which I think came out, and then his in-studio video is coming out on the academy in a couple days. But yeah, he's like, that's the great day where you sit back right before you went to sleep and you're like, did I just do that today? That was crazy. When, whatever, you just interviewed the president or whatever you did, or you just did something incredible. I'm like, yeah, if you can have a few of those moments, like that's what you want. And I guess that is a sign of a flow state. If you're feeling like you have all these multiple lives like condensed, Because like Mariana just told me, she's like, yesterday, she's like, a year ago we had dinner with Dan Pena at the Ritz. And I was like, a year ago? That feels like 2 years or 3 years ago. So it was a year ago. I hadn't even been to his castle. I hadn't done any of that stuff. Like, that's crazy. And in the Academy 4 months ago, that doesn't even seem right.
I'm warped
Yeah.
when you start living like totally in this like present moment.
Yeah, and you said two things that just made me think there. One is this constructive criticism, like this feedback loop, and like I must say, I'm finding it more and more valuable. Like, you know, at the focus groups, everyone tells their story, which is great, and then and then at the end, like, we all stand up and take our beating. So it's like me and Julian and Dre, and it's like, what do you want more of? And like, people don't pull punches in that group. Like, everyone loves London Real, and they love me, and they love the Academy. But man, when it comes to the end of it, they're like, this sucks, this sucks, this sucks. We want more of this. We want more of this. We want more of this. And you got to really take your lumps. And like on a Friday afternoon when you've been producing shows all week, and you're tired and exhausted, and it's like 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night, and you're hearing all this, it's hard. And nobody wants to hear criticism. We just don't. It's natural. Yeah. And yet, after every webinar, we turn the cameras off, and I go right to Julian and Dre. I'm like, what was not good? And we make a big list about what we didn't do right on that webinar. And we're always making notes about what was bad, what was bad, what was bad. And so, if I would say to anybody, just really try to force yourself to get that constructive, criticism, and just really push people for it. Your friends, your family, and just say, what could I do differently? The surveys are really important. I met with a tech guy in London the other day, and he came over as a favor just to help us out for a couple hours. He sent me a feedback form, which was like a thing he did with everyone he met. Like, even if it wasn't a business transaction, like I said, he was doing me a favor by coming to my studio and gave us some advice on the Academy. And it was a feedback form saying, what could I have done better? How could I have been more present? And then I was like, that's someone at the top of their game. Yeah. And now that you're saying that with flow state, it makes sense. If you can just man up and take it, and look, I'm on the internet, and so I get lots of people say bad things to me on YouTube and on Twitter, and like, I'm kind of over it. It doesn't bother me. But I'm telling you, even those people are telling you things that are the truth about you. Yeah. And if someone's going out of their way to say, you know what, I don't like the new London Real, Brian. I don't like the way the Academy is. I liked it better when the old days. It's like, you got to listen to that. And I'd be like, I hear you, buddy. Okay. I know in this case that the Academy is super powerful energy, and I know where I'm going, but I'm listening to you, and I know you want that. So tell you what, I'm going to be present, and I'm going to get back to you in the next 3 months, and I'm going to make sure the show guides back to that way too.
It just reminds me, just to finish up on this, but basically like Robert Greene's like series of books, including like Mastery, it's just really listening to those like constructive criticism, like those are the blind spots. And I think that blind spots are also like the gateway into like flow, or the sweet spots of life too. So, it's just fascinating that, well, when again, I talked about your humility, the ability to listen, but that's to me what like business is all about. Like you're providing value to your customers, you're giving what your customers want. And the hardest part is just like trying to figure out like who to listen to like the majority of the time. So is there something that you do in particular that helps filter like the trolls that are just trying to like poke at you and get a response to like the legitimate like concerns that your viewers and customers have?
It's a good question. I had the technology show, Silicon Reel, and so that's all about tech startups. And that's when I learned about even doing the focus group, and then just listen to your customers. And that's an easy thing to say, listen to your customers. And like anybody who's been a businessman, and I know you have, and you are, is that like, you got to listen to your customers, especially a startup or an entrepreneur, because that's the most valuable information, like bar none. And yet an entrepreneur has to have a vision, and you're like, I'll tell the customer what they want. Most startups, they don't listen. They actually just don't. They're like, this is my vision and this is what it's going to be. But the only reason we did that is because I had that tech background because of that show. So we just started listening, and like, it's hard to listen. You got to really listen. And so the Academy members, they are paying for this Academy, which it's an interesting relationship, because it means not only, you're getting paid, but that's like only the beginning of it. Is that someone's investing their money and their time in something they believe that is going to be bigger. And so if you listen to them and then build what they say, like, that's precious, precious information that I'd say most companies even ignore these days. And so like we learned that early on, and so we've really tried to listen, even though it's hard, because like we have this vision. And so just having the focus groups are important because they come into your studio, they come into your space, and they tell you and tell you. So even if you don't want to listen, you're not going to have to, because these people, they say the same message week after week, and finally you're like, guys, subconsciously you're hearing it. So we try to do that, listen, and then for the people that are giving us comments on YouTube, you know, we hear it all, trust me. Like, I don't read every comment, but like Julian does or Mariana does, and if they start feeling that 5% or 10% of the audience are saying the same thing, trust me, I know about it. And so I hear about it, and finally someone will just say, you know, people are saying this, and it's just like, okay. And then if you hear the same thing 2 weeks later, same thing 4 weeks later, well, guess what? They're right. And, you know, I told Olive, because Olive started New York Reel, and she's like, Brian, how do I know where to listen and when do I do feedback? I'm like, look, Olive, you know where you're going, so go where you're going, but, you know, listen, you know, make small adjustments to what people are saying, you know? And then also, some of it's to toughen you up as well, you know?
So let's end on the final note. Please tell everybody, the viewers, what is your vision? And perhaps maybe it's evolved, or it is, I mean, obviously it's evolving, but what is your vision right now?
In general, for my life, for London Reel, for what, everything?
Yeah.
You know, like you said, the last 4 months have just been incredible, and like, I don't know where we're going, but I know where we're going is awesome. And so I just want to make sure that we keep doing that, and I don't want to try to control it too much. I've done that in the past, where I just try to control everything about my life and control people and the this and the that. It's just like, it's pointless. So the idea is to like keep the energy flowing, to keep taking risks, to keep putting myself into uncomfortable places, you know, like starting the academy or getting out in front and doing webinars. Like, I never done a webinar until say 12 weeks ago. And now to come out and do these focus groups, I want to get out and meet more people, like go to more focus groups around the world. Like, because I learn a lot by being in San Francisco and feeling the vibe and listening to what people are saying. So I think the feedback loop is super important, and one I didn't know about then. And to just find out where this academy is, we don't know what it is yet. We don't even know what London Reel is yet. And so, like, you know, I don't know what it is yet. You know, it's some place where we're all going. Everyone is feeling this vibe. We're selecting these people, and it's super important to remember that. And you're going to feel this with Floreal, is that you're not going to get everybody, and you don't want everybody. And this goes back to my TED Talk, when like my friends and family wouldn't like my Facebook page for London Reel.
Right.
And I'm telling you, Tony, the same thing happened with the academy. We started the academy. You know, it's $99 a quarter, and I was like, all my friends, I'm like, my 3 best friends, I'm like, are you going to sign up? And, you know, they don't sign up. And I'm like, these are my best friends, you know, and I'm like, they don't sign up. And I'm like, gosh. And I'm like, you know what? Oh, it's heartbreaking. But you know what? It's feedback, and it's a pain point, and you should listen to it. And here's the message. They're not your customers. Go find the people that are, again, in your tribe. Go find the people you haven't met yet that are like you. Go find the Tonys in the world, or the Brendas in the world, or the Olives in the world. Those are the people you really want to meet. You already have your best friends. You have your family. They'll always be your friends and family, but you want to find like your tribe members. Yeah. And so it's important to remember that's not going to be 100,000 of them. You know, even if it's 10, you know, or 100, or you know, these are all, that's a lot. So if you can find these people and self-select them by you being yourself with your own message, right, then that's the most valuable thing ever. Because look, 4 years ago, there was no London Reel, and I felt like I was a hermit now compared to what I am now. You know, all my friends were in banking. They were my clients. You know, they were in the same mentality I was. We were all trying to get paid. Like, we were all chasing this goal that didn't seem to ever go anywhere. You know, now I meet people that are awesome and cool, and it's because I'm being myself and I'm being genuine. I'm in the flow. I'm being Brian, and I'm doing everything that I love doing, and I'm being myself. And like, look who it attracts, all these awesome people. And yet when I had this false goal before of, I'm going to make $1 million, I'm going to make 10 million, I'm going to make 100 million, I'm going to be a billionaire. That's what everyone's dream these days. I'm going to be a billionaire. You know, where is that getting you, you know? And then who are you going to be? You know, ask guys like Tim Ferriss. Most of the billionaires he meets are really unhappy people that are really petty about not being richer than the other billionaire. I mean, like, look, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I don't know where we're going, but I know like our core values of what we need to do to get there. So keep the academy awesome. Keep the people in it awesome. If the people aren't right, they got to go. Don't try to build it too quick. Keep London Reel amazing. Keep pushing myself to like go harder, go bigger, go better. Think about different things we can do, make it more interactive, make more ways of people coming together, facilitate you meeting the next 10 people in your life that are going to change your life. And I just think if we do that, all this good stuff's going to happen. I'm 44. I probably got another 44 years left of where I'm conscious of that. Yeah. So like, it needs to be just pure awesomeness. It doesn't really matter how much money we're going to make. It doesn't matter how many subscribers I'm going to have. It's just, I really feel like I got a limited amount of time. It just needs to all be awesome and incredible. And I'm so grateful to London Real. I'm grateful to London Real. I don't feel like I own it. It feels it owns me. I'm grateful to what it's become and who it's brought me in touch with. And I feel like I just need to be a servant of London Real and make sure it keeps going and keeps flowing. You know, I mean, London Real should be in a flow state. In a way, it feels like it is now. Yeah. It's got the site, it's got the studio, it's got the academy, it's got the meetups. Like, it needs to keep flowing.
Yes, greased.
It needs to keep doing new things. Like, we don't even know what it's going to do. Like, when you're surfing and you're out there and you're in the zone, you don't even know what you're going to do. And you pull something off, and you're like, man, I didn't even think I was going to do that. If you had tried to prepare to do that, you wouldn't have pulled it off. Yeah. And all of a sudden, just boom, that just happened. So I guess we should think about what you're thinking about.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, I think that's the medicine of the future.
I think you're right, man. Yeah. And I love what you're doing. I love everything you're doing, first of all.
Thank you very much.
And so, you know, it's been an honor meeting you and knowing you and my family, getting to meet you and all that. But I love the idea of talking about the flow state and people thinking about the flow state, because it is a way of thinking about consciousness. It's almost a better way. And these words like meditation, consciousness, psychedelic, spirituality, people have their own bents on them, but flow seems like something people can get excited about.
Absolutely. And with the science coming on board with neuroscience and technology, it's making it the woo-woo actually tangible. Yeah. So, you know, and there's ways that people can, it's bridging the gap between like the woo-woo to science, you know, and people can relate to that more. And I feel like flow is the future.
It is the future. And think about it. We all want to be around people that are flowing. And we want to be ourselves that are flowing. Absolutely. And we know people that flow, and we know people that don't flow. Yeah. And it's like you could spot them in a room.
Oh yeah, they just have that like glow about them, right?
Yeah. And we all have it, and we've all
the X factor.
Yeah, and we've all had it. We've all had points in our life when we had it. I can remember when I didn't have it, and I remember it distinctly, and I always remember that. So it's like we all can be there. So why not surround yourself with as much flow as possible and get yourself into the flow? So.
Brian, thank you so much for coming on the show.
You're welcome, man.
And enjoy the rest of your trip in San Francisco. I look forward to more flow with you in the future, and I'm so grateful for our time here.
My pleasure. All the best with Floreal. You're a great interviewer, great vibe. I felt like we were flowing the whole time, so it was a lot of fun to be on here. Like I said, I don't do this very much, but I'm really glad I did it. Yeah. So look, just do me a favor. Keep these consistent. I want to see Floreal number 100 coming up, and you know, no excuses. And that's all I got to say. And then, you know, we'll be talking about that in a couple years, and boom, you'll be, you know, knocking these things off in 3 digits. I think it's a great thing to do. And we were talking earlier, you know, if you make this part of your life, then it becomes something in your life, and it just becomes part of you. And I'm telling you, the people, like you could delete all my video views on YouTube right now, but just the people I've met in the last 4 years have changed my life just through talks and conversations. So I think the same thing's going to happen to you.
I appreciate it. Thanks for putting me on the spot. And, you know,
that's what I do.
Definitely keep my word on that one for sure, man. Cool, man. This is just too fun to give up.
Awesome, buddy.
So
cool, man.
Thank you.
All right, dude. Good, man. That was awesome.